Alexander Skarsgård, welcome to Q.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start out by contrasting films I've seen you in before with the way you're depicted in this film. I think the last thing I saw you in was the Tarzan film.
Oh, yeah.
And then in this, because I'm trying to figure out how to put this, but you were well put together. You had obviously taken care of yourself. And in this new film, you're more of like a hunched over nerd. Is that a bad word to use? Nerd character?
Well, he's definitely a more cerebral character, and he's not very athletic, to say the least. Yeah.
So tell me about the getting into this role. Then, what did you have to do to prepare for this role?
Well, when I read the script, I just the guy is a coder. He works on Wall Street. He's a theoretical physics engineer and works at a Wall Street firm with his cousin, played by Jesse Eisenberg. And they almost have it's almost like a mice and men dynamic of where Vinny, Jesse's character, is the outgoing social guy, and Anton, who I play, he does not enjoy conversation with people 99% of the time, because he finds people, it's not very stimulating to him. He finds them quite stupid and boring, and he enjoys talking about algorithms, and not a lot of people do that, share that passion. And if it's any other topic, he gets kind of bored. So he's kind of dependent on having Vinny around, because that's kind of his connection to the outside world. So it creates this dynamic where he's when he's not with Vinny, he's very uncomfortable, unless he's with his wife or kids. But the outside world kind of not scares him, but is kind of foreign to him.
I mean, that's funny, because I think before I saw the film, it was kind of pitched to me as like, oh, this is a film about technology. This is a film about venture capital. People trying to make as much money as they can. But I think when you watch the film, it's ultimately about family.
Yeah.
It's ultimately about people leaning on one another.
Yeah. And priorities. What's important in life, and what is it? What are your goals, and what are you striving for, and what's the motivation? And what was so fascinating to me was, so they embark on this absolutely insane adventure, this crazy endeavor to dig a tunnel for a fiber optic cable from Kansas City to New York.
To shave milliseconds.
To shave a couple of milliseconds, yeah. And by having the fastest connection between the Kansas Electronic Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange, they can use that almost like as a highway, and then they rent it out to people, to traders, so they can use it. And it's obviously like, if you're the fastest, then if you're 1 millisecond faster than your competitors, that's it's a lot of money at stake. So they embark, and this has never been done, but similar things have been done, and it's based on the concept is real, and I believe it's a tunnel from Chicago to New York that was operational for a couple of years. But what was fascinating to me was for Anton, the motivation. This wasn't like Fitzcarraldo, where he's obsessed with doing this for some tangible reason. It's not to raise money for a worthy cause or because it's a lifelong dream. It's kind of, he does it because Vinny asks him to do it.
Right.
And I find that quite interesting. People that embark on extraordinary adventures, but where there was this podcast that I listened to last week about the Apollo 8 mission, and the commander of the mission, I believe his name was Frank Borman. So the Apollo 8 went around the moon before Armstrong landed, I think it was 7 or 8 months before they landed on the moon. And it was from that mission they shot the iconic shot of the Earthrise, where you see the moon and then the Earthrise. And it was so fascinating to listen to this interview because he was he was not into space. This guy, he was just like, it was almost like there was not like a lifelong dream of his to go out and just to be an explorer, to go out into space. It was kind of serendipitously. He was just like, well, I was a pilot in the Air Force, and then this came up, and then
Right.
I found myself in space, and they were like, wasn't it amazing? It's like, yeah, I don't know. I was just missing my wife and my kids, and
Yeah.
it was just like a job, and it doesn't sound very romantic, but
But I see a parallel here even with your career, because you were an actor by the time you were 13 years old.
yeah,
And then you stopped acting when you were 13, right?
yeah.
What motivated that decision to stop when you were 13?
Because I was ridiculously famous.
It's always hard.
Yeah, it sucks. No, so this was in Sweden, and I did a movie that got a little bit of attention in Sweden, and it just made me very uncomfortable. It really,
What did?
huh?
What made you uncomfortable?
The attention. I was 13, and it's I don't know if you remember being 13, but I think for most people it was kind of a weird age.
Yeah.
And a lot was happening, a lot was changing. I wasn't a man, but I was also not a boy, and it was like that kind of a transitional state. And I was very insecure, and like I think most kids are that age. So to then be in the spotlight, what made it just kind of like put a spotlight on my insecurities in a way, and that made me, it just kind of perpetuated that and made it even worse and made me quite paranoid. Right. And I felt that people like at school would want to hang out with me, or a girl would be interested in me because of that movie and not because they thought I was interesting.
Right.
So yeah, I quit. But it wasn't a tough decision because I wasn't a child actor, professional child actor. It wasn't like I had a headshot and I went to auditions.
Yeah.
My father's an actor, so I'd been acting like kind of like, here and there, doing bits and pieces in different movies and stuff. So it wasn't like I'm giving up this career now. When I was 13, it was just like, this isn't fun, so I'm just not going to do it.
I see. This is what I find interesting. I mean, on the topic of Apollo 8 and on the topic of this film, people who end up doing work they're doing and it just kind of happening, and then having to deal with the idea of it kind of happening as opposed to going out and seeking it out and just being your lifelong passion.
Yeah.
Because I even know when you did Zoolander, that was you went in and you just auditioned on a bit of a whim, right?
Yeah, I did. But at that point, I was quite committed to acting.
You wanted to be an actor.
Yeah, I just started. So I didn't act for like 7 or 8 years, and then I went to theater school in New York, dropped out, moved to Sweden. I was doing a play in Stockholm. I was 22, 23, and my father was shooting a movie in Los Angeles, and I went out there to visit because he usually rents a house, and the whole family. I'm from a very big family, so like people, we would all go and hang out.
Yeah.
So I was there hanging out on vacation, and then his manager, again, I didn't have representation in the States. I just started acting again as an adult. And his manager said, "Do you want to? I'll send you out on an audition if you think that'd be interesting." Mm-hmm. And I thought, yeah, why not? That could be fun. Like again, like I didn't expect anything, and it wasn't like, oh, no, I'm in Hollywood. Like it was just, I felt like there's going to be a good story to tell my friends back home.
Yeah.
Like I went to Hollywood and, I auditioned for something.
Yeah, right.
And it happened to be Zoolander.
Do you think that helps? We had Bryan Cranston on the show a little while ago, and he said that it was only when he went to auditions without needing the job,
Yeah.
that he started getting jobs.
Yeah.
When he went in and said, I just want to show these people what I can do,
Yeah.
then he started getting work. Can you relate to that?
Well, if they can smell your desperation, that's not very attractive. And if they feel, it's a classic case of courtship, isn't it? Like if they feel like you're too eager, if you want it too badly, if you're too like desperate to have it, if they can see that in your eyes, if they can smell that as you walk into the room,
Yeah.
it's less attracted to them. But if you walk in, it's not like you don't care, but it's not the end of the world if you don't get it. I think there might be, I can see how it'd be a tendency for them to lean in more a bit, like what's going on here. And it wasn't that I didn't want it. I just obviously didn't expect anything, and so I wasn't even nervous. I was just like, I don't like.
Right. I want to talk some more about maybe. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to talk a little bit more about the unconventional ways that one can find themselves in work in Hollywood. So I got the headphones there. Would you mind putting these on?
Yeah.
So this is well, let's take a listen to it first, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Whenever you're ready, Brittany. So that's the anthem for your beloved team, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's a Hummingbird IF.
Yeah.
And I know that ended up getting you work because put this popping back on for a second.
Yeah.
I think you know what we're gonna play, but take a listen. So that's you fired up at the soccer game.
I'm sorry.
You're fired up. You're at the soccer game.
Yeah.
And that ends up finding you work.
Yeah. 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 I'm not sure, but that's what my it might have helped.
It might have helped. There's a story there, right?
Yes. So it's a team. I was born in South Stockholm, and there's a local team called Hammarby, a football team or soccer team.
Yeah.
And traditionally not a very good team. It's a working class team with not a lot of money, so it's kind of like the underdog of Swedish football, but a very, very, very big fan base, very loyal, very loud fans. And I grew up going to those games in Stockholm, and it's still something I love to do when I come home. It's a very, I don't know if you've been to a soccer game in Europe, but it's
wild, man.
It's pretty wild.
It's wild. It's wild.
But it's also like it's a big part of the culture. You
Yeah.
get together with your friends, and you go to the pub before the game, and then you go to the game.
Yeah.
And I went to a game a couple years ago, and I was for some reason leading the chant, as you do.
Yeah.
and it was around the time when I'd met with David Yates for Tarzan a couple of times, and the stuff they'd seen me in was not more cerebral, but they hadn't seen me in very physical roles. So I didn't know that this conversation was happening, but Jerry Weintraub and David Yates were talking to Warner Brothers, and I think they wanted me for the role. And some people at Warner Brothers were a bit, well, is he enough of an animal, so to speak? Does he have that kind of that animalistic or atavistic quality that we need for Tarzan? And then this happened. And my agent sent that to some people at Warner Brothers and said, "Is this animalistic enough for you?" And I don't know if that got me the job, but yeah,
it's a good yarn anyway. It's a good story.
Yeah.
So it brings me to my final question, which is I want to go back to what you were saying off the top about goals. About how this film is about family, but it's also about goals and about the reason people do things. And I don't want in any way for the clips and the examples I gave today to give anyone an impression that you're not an incredibly gifted actor, because you're obviously a very, very gifted actor. And it's what I find is amazing is there's that, and sometimes opportunities present themselves which lead you to the goals that you end up having. I'm wondering if you could just talk to me a little bit. I know it's a bit broad, but if you could talk to me a little bit about how making this film made you reflect on the idea of goals and the idea of dreams.
Well, and I've never really had, in terms of my career, I've never really set out. I've never had goals. I've never had this is what I want to accomplish, or in 3 years this is where I want to be, or. And I'm not saying it in a pretentious way of I'm in the moment and I'm trying to enjoy it.
I understand.
It's, of course, I have ambitions and dreams, but it's not. I'm so aware of the fact that it's also there's a big aspect of luck is a big aspect of it. You've got to be in the right place at the right time when something shows up, and and also like it's a combination of where you are at the moment when you read something, because you might respond to something one day that you wouldn't have responded to a year ago or a year from now. So I'm in terms of navigating my career, I never know what I'll respond to next. I think it's often a reaction to what I've just done.
Yeah.
So if I've played one role, I think I'm more open to characters that are quite different, because it'll be a more fun experience.
Right.
But I'm terrible at navigating that. It's all kind of instinctive. Yeah.
It's been really nice talking to you.
I've enjoyed this myself.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank
I
you, man. Thanks
appreciate
for
that.
playing this.